The truth stayed buried until the DNA finally spoke. For weeks, the world believed they understood the mystery. News reports repeated the same safe narrative. Officials held tense press conferences. Family members stood in front of cameras, their voices trembling, their eyes filled with fear. But behind closed doors, investigators were fighting a silent war against something far more disturbing than anyone imagined. Because what they found inside that sealed forensic envelope was not just evidence. It was betrayal written in blood. Sources close to the investigation say the lab went completely silent the moment the results appeared on the screen. A senior analyst reportedly whispered, "This changes everything." Another investigator walked out of the room, unable to speak. The DNA didn't just identify a suspect. It exposed a connection no one saw coming. A connection so personal, so explosive, it threatens to tear apart reputations, families, and a carefully protected public image. And now, insiders fear this revelation was never meant to be discovered. The question is no longer what happened. The question is, who was hiding the truth? And trust me, when you find out whose name is linked to that DNA sample, you'll understand why this case just turned into a ticking time bomb. It all began long before that fateful night in Catalina foothills. Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old matriarch, was far from the quiet retiree the public thought she was. To outsiders, she was a gracious hostess, a philanthropist with endless charm, and a woman whose name carried weight in charity circles and high-powered political events. But insiders whispered a different story. Behind the polished gala invitations and the philanthropic veneer, there were tensions, rivalries, and secrets buried deep in her sprawling estate. Secrets that some say were worth more than money. Secrets that might have made her a target long before anyone even knocked on her door. Nancy's family, the Guthries, were no strangers to drama. Savannah Guthrie, her granddaughter, had been embroiled in a bitter public dispute over control of the family's charitable foundations. Leaked emails suggested months of heated exchanges over finances, investments, and the direction of donations. And then there were the whispers about Nancy's personal security team, once loyal, now fractured. Former aides spoke of a divide and conquer environment where staff loyalty was tested daily. Some even claimed that certain caregivers had been manipulated into unknowingly feeding information to outsiders. Could these whispers now hold the key to the shocking events that unfolded? But let's not forget the backdrop that made this story explode. Catalina Foothills itself is no ordinary neighborhood. It's a fortress of wealth, a place where gates, cameras, and private security are standard. Yet, despite all that, Nancy vanished in the dead of night. How could someone slip past this modern-day fortress? How could someone take her without a single scream, without alerting a single neighbor? And most importantly, how could the digital trail, the crypto wallets, the surveillance footage, be so meticulously orchestrated that it blurred the line between reality and performance? Adding fuel to the fire were the first reports. Blood on the porch, a masked figure captured on doorbell footage, gloves, a backpack, slow, calculated movements. The imagery was cinematic, almost too perfect. And then, the ransom. $6 million in cryptocurrency. Deadlines passed without movement. Wallets untouched. The public was screaming for answers. But the more we looked, the more contradictions appeared. Why would a real kidnapper operate so openly? Why would they depend on public visibility, seemingly inviting cameras and journalists into their plan?
Kidnappings are supposed to be fast.
And let's not ignore the family's emotional response. Days turned into weeks. Savannah and other family members made tearful pleas on camera, their voices breaking with anguish, desperation, and fear. But some insiders quietly suggested the optics were just as calculated as the crime itself. Leaked text messages between family members and advisors hinted at unusual discussions. Phrases like, "We need to control the narrative," and "timing is everything," kept resurfacing. Was this raw emotion, or a carefully orchestrated drama designed to pull the nation's eyes toward Catalina Foothills at a precise moment? Sources close to the investigation, speaking anonymously, painted an even darker picture. They suggested Nancy's disappearance was entwined with long-standing disputes in the family business and charitable empire. Property developments, financial stakes, and hidden benefactors. All of it created layers of motive, some of which reached far beyond ordinary greed. Could the abduction have been an elaborate power play? Or worse, was this disappearance a performance staged by someone inside, using fear as a weapon to manipulate everyone from law enforcement to the press? And then, there were the first cracks in the story we all thought we knew. Investigators quietly confirmed 2 unidentified DNA profiles at the scene, profiles that didn't match Nancy, didn't match anyone in the household, and didn't appear in any criminal database. 2 strangers, completely untraceable, yet somehow part of this night that seemed impossibly choreographed. How did these individuals appear, and why were they connected to Nancy? Could they have been accomplices? Or witnesses to a story far stranger than a typical kidnapping? Social media had already exploded before the investigation could catch up. TikTok clips dissecting the doorbell footage, Twitter threads questioning the family's pleas, Instagram posts from insiders claiming access to private chats, all fueled paranoia and speculation. One viral post even suggested Nancy might have orchestrated her own disappearance as a message, a statement, or even as revenge for perceived betrayals within her circle. Was this just another conspiracy theory, or a breadcrumb leading to a devastating truth? And here's where the tension escalates even further. While the public was glued to the screens, federal agents were quietly moving behind the scenes. Hundreds deployed, canvassing gun stores, verifying surveillance, testing DNA, and analyzing every detail of the estate. And yet, the deeper they dug, the more they questioned the narrative fed to them. Some top officials openly wondered if they had been chasing shadows, if the story they were told was a carefully constructed illusion. Was this a kidnapping at all, or had the cameras captured a masterclass in deception? Every revelation seemed to raise more questions. Who truly had the motive? Who had access? Who stood to gain if the world believed Nancy Guthrie was missing? And as these questions swirled, one chilling realization emerged. If Nancy was alive, she might not be safe. If she wasn't, then someone had pulled off a performance so convincing that even the most experienced investigators were left second-guessing themselves. And somewhere in the background, a silent player watched, waited, and perhaps laughed, because the narrative was no longer just about a missing woman. It was about control, perception, and secrets that could shake an entire community to its core. And trust me, what investigators uncovered next will leave you stunned. At first, the disappearance felt like a nightmare that would quickly end. She wasn't just another missing person. She was a beloved public figure's mother, a gentle, soft-spoken woman who lived a quiet life away from flashing cameras and screaming headlines. Friends described her as cautious, deeply routine-oriented, and someone who never opened the door without checking twice. The neighborhood she lived in was considered one of the safest in the state, filled with private security patrols, surveillance cameras, and neighbors who knew each other by name. Which is why what happened that night made no sense. At exactly 1:42 a.m., a motion light flickered on near the side entrance of the house. Security footage later showed a faint shadow moving across the driveway, but the figure never fully appeared on camera. Then, just 7 minutes later, the indoor hallway camera mysteriously froze. Not glitched, not cut, frozen, like someone had paused reality itself. And when the feed resumed, she was gone. No shattered glass, no forced locks, no overturned furniture, just an eerie stillness that sent chills down every investigator's spine. But here's where things start getting stranger. Sources close to the family revealed that she had received a disturbing phone call just hours before vanishing. The number was unknown. The voice on the other end was distorted, mechanical, impossible to identify. But according to insiders, the caller only said 6 words before hanging up. You should have stayed silent. Silent about what? That question opened the door to a past few people even knew existed. Because years before the disappearance, the family had quietly navigated a series of private controversies that never reached the public eye. Legal disputes, business disagreements, broken partnerships that ended in bitterness and threats behind closed doors. Nothing criminal on the surface, but enough tension to build enemies who felt wronged, betrayed, or financially devastated. One former associate who requested anonymity claimed there had been explosive arguments over confidential matters that could have damaged reputations if exposed. Another insider described long-standing grudges that never truly healed, hinting that certain individuals believed justice had never been served. Still, none of it seemed serious enough to escalate into something this extreme, or so everyone thought. Investigators initially focused on outside threats, professional criminals, organized groups, ransom networks operating across state lines. The theory sounded logical: a high-profile connection, a secure neighborhood, a vulnerable elderly target. It fit the pattern of calculated abductions seen in similar cases. But evidence refused to cooperate. There were no unusual financial transactions, no credible ransom follow-ups, no digital footprints pointing to known crime syndicates. Instead, forensic teams discovered something deeply unsettling. The security system had been temporarily disabled using a manual override code. Not hacked, entered. That code was only shared with a very small circle of trusted individuals, family members,
close staff,
and a handful of longtime associates. Suddenly, what looked like an outside operation started feeling disturbingly personal. And then came another detail that investigators kept hidden from the press. There were no defensive injuries at the scene, no signs of panic, no desperate attempt to escape, which suggested one terrifying possibility. She may have opened the door willingly, not to a stranger, but to someone she recognized, someone she trusted. As this possibility gained traction, investigators began re-examining every relationship in her life. Old messages were pulled from archived devices. Deleted emails were restored. Private calls from months ago were suddenly treated like critical evidence. And that, my friends, is just the beginning. Because what comes next, the first shocking confrontation, the betrayals, and the twists, will make you question everything you thought you knew about Nancy Guthrie. And trust me, you're not ready for what's about to drop. It was 2:12 a.m. when the world as we knew it changed. Nancy Guthrie was gone. Not missing her morning walk, gone. Vanished from the very estate that everyone assumed was untouchable. The door to her mansion was locked, but the garage lights had flickered like a warning. And there, captured in chilling clarity on the security footage, was a figure that would haunt the nation. Masked, gloved, slow, deliberate. A calm predator.
Kidnappings
Or
are supposed
was it
to be
someone
fast.
who belonged there all along? The way the figure moved suggested confidence, almost familiarity, not panic. And that is when investigators first whispered the words no one outside that room dared speak. This doesn't feel like a random kidnapping. The first round of public panic was deafening. Savannah Guthrie, tears streaming, begged cameras to bring her grandmother home. Social media lit up with outrage, shock, and fear. Hashtags like #FindNancy and #CatalinaMystery exploded on Twitter, trending worldwide within hours. But while the world demanded answers, insiders were quietly leaking details that were even more disturbing than the masked figure itself. According to an anonymous source close to the investigation, multiple staff members had been questioned, and almost immediately,
Kidnappings are
a web of
supposed to be
conflicting
fast.
statements emerged. Some claimed to have seen strangers near the property days earlier. Others hinted at strange behavior from Nancy's own aides, furtive phone calls, unexplained late-night outings, and access to areas of the mansion that were supposed to be restricted. Then came the first bombshell. The crypto ransom wallets were untouched. $6 million. Empty. Deadlines passed. Not a single transfer. Former FBI analysts spoke off-record, openly questioning the story that had captivated millions. If this were a real ransom, the victim's life is leverage, one insider said. Here, there is no leverage, no proof of life, no urgency. The narrative doesn't match the crime. Meanwhile, the masked figure became a meme, dissected frame by frame, analyzed endlessly, yet no one could confirm their identity. And just when the story seemed like it couldn't get any stranger, the first twist hit like a thunderclap. Leaked messages from a supposedly private family chat were published online. In one, a family member allegedly texted, "We control the narrative. Make sure cameras capture every plea. It has to look real." In another, a cryptic note said, "Timing is everything. Don't let anyone see the gaps." Suddenly, the public began to wonder, was this just a desperate family? Or had someone inside orchestrated a performance so convincing that even federal investigators were being manipulated? Investigators scrambled. Hundreds of federal agents, helicopters, command posts, everything mobilized as if preparing for a full-scale manhunt. Yet, inside the mansion, there was no overturned furniture, no signs of a prolonged struggle, and only a small amount of blood on the porch. DNA tests later revealed 2 unidentified profiles, not matching Nancy, not matching anyone in the household, and not in any criminal database. 2 unknown individuals, a presence that couldn't be ignored,
are supposed to be
yet
fast.
invisible to law enforcement. Who were they? And why were they there? The media had a field day. TMZ called it a sophisticated abduction. News Nation labeled it targeted. But the more the footage circulated, the more cracks appeared. Experts pointed out something chilling. The masked figure never seemed to rush. Calm, deliberate steps, hands measured, movement confident. It suggested insider knowledge. Someone who knew the layout, knew the routines. Someone who could walk in and out without tripping alarms. Was this really a kidnapping or a high-stakes setup designed to look like one? Then came the first real confrontation. A local journalist claimed to have spoken to a former aide who revealed in tears, "They told us to make it look real. Every camera, every moment scripted." That statement sent shockwaves across social media. TikTok exploded with clips comparing the original footage to staged acting tutorials. Twitter users speculated nonstop. Was Nancy's disappearance a ruse? Were we all being played? Even veteran investigators admitted privately that some behaviors on camera, pleading voices, carefully staged footage, didn't align with what they had learned about real-life abductions. And just when we thought we had a handle on the situation, the first twist hit the hardest. A leaked internal memo from Puma County's Joint Task Force suggested the impossible. According to sources, the memo questioned the very premise of the kidnapping. Lines like, "Absence of post-abduction communication inconsistent with profit-motivated offender," and "consider alternative scenarios," made the nation's jaw drop. If this wasn't about money, what was it about? Was someone manipulating every aspect of the story, from the doorbell camera to the family's public pleas, to achieve a goal no one could yet understand? By now, the world was divided. Half the population believed in a real, terrifying abduction. The other half whispered about a staged disappearance, a performance designed to misdirect, to hide something far larger and darker. And as the public argued, investigators continued digging into Nancy's past connections, financial dealings, charitable foundations, political influence, uncovering motives that went far beyond personal vendettas. Every revelation hinted that the story was bigger than anyone could have imagined, with layers of deception, power, and hidden agendas lurking behind every door in that mansion. And just when the tension seemed unbearable, a new leak surfaced, dropping the first real bombshell. An eyewitness claimed that Nancy Guthrie herself might have been seen in public 2 days after the alleged abduction. Calm, composed, unbothered. Social media erupted. Was she alive the whole time? Was the abduction just a distraction? Or was someone willing to risk everything to make the world believe she was missing?